Oh, going live. Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to the Climate Fiction Book Club. We are back for the month of June, and we read this slim little novella, The Impossible Resurrection of Grief by Dr. Octavia Cade. And I want to hear, before I say anything, I want to hear what real info out of it, just like generally.
Well, I loved it a lot, actually. It's like the first book in this like book club that I've actually enjoyed.
Oh,
like for real. I'm like, yes, I actually like this one a lot. And it made me think like a lot about a lot of stuff. Consider like a lot of feelings I would have. And I really liked that. And I also liked how it was short. And I'm really excited to discuss it.
Does this happen to your small books, or am I just
no? Yeah, mine is really kind of wonky too.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, I also like this book a lot. Yeah, I think that Octavia Cade has a really like unique writing style, and the way that she's like her connection with climate change is really interesting because she's like, it says has a PhD in science communication, which is like not a PhD I've ever heard of, but I don't know a lot about like academia. And so I think like it was coming from this place of really being connected to climate change in like a social way, which was really interesting to see how she played that out, like with the concept of grief. I also love, like, it's a weird thing to say you love grief, but I think it's like such a cool process, and I've like gone through stages of grief. I've like helped people through stages of grief. I was trained as a death doula, so I've like worked with people like going through dying and having lost people, and so it's cool to like, or it was cool to see that like grief personified in a way. Yeah, it was just a really cool concept, and I liked what she did. Yes.
Yeah, I felt very validated by just like from the first couple opening pages of the book. Like, let's take climate grief seriously for once, because I feel like we just go through our life. Like, our generation is just something we've been experiencing all of our life, or most of our life, maybe. And those of us that is very real to us, like, I don't know. It's nice to have a book that just takes it very seriously. And like, yes, this is a really serious mental health challenge. It was very validating for me. Hi, Evan and Strawberry. Thanks for being here. Would love to hear what y'all thought about the book, just like general first impressions. And we can put it up in the on the live stream. So yeah, I don't know, what did you think of the character of Ruby, the narrator?
I mean, she's like kind of a little bit unlikable, right? Like she's kind of, also because the ending, you're like, oh God. But she makes choices that actually like compartmentalizing like her feelings, because she is sort of like a scientist, and because she has like so much love for this like one species that is actually thriving. She's like blinded by the fact that what she loves is still okay, and she like doesn't really feel the same way for like all species, and can't really like sympathize in the same way like with people who have the grief. But I mean, at the same time, she has a lot of like very interesting reflections. So it's a very great character for me.
Do you see yourself in her? Like, I don't want to think of myself this way, but I do compartmentalize like that when it comes to climate change. I mean, I think it's a coping mechanism, right? And I think like when I'm seeing, if I'm being really honest, I mean, this sounds kind of horrible, but when I see like about the horrible drought and heat that's happening out west, I think things like, well, at least here in the Gulf, we'll always have hurricanes. So there will be precipitation that comes off the Gulf. And it's like, maybe I'll be okay here. Or like, you know, this species is dying out, but there's this other species that I can love and care about. And it's like, as the viable ecosystems and plants and animals of the natural world keeps shrinking, it's like, well, I still got blue jays in my backyard, you know? Like maybe I'll just care a lot about them and get really into them.
Yeah, like at least there's rats on the mountains.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Evan has had similar thoughts. Evan lives below sea level. Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
I live at sea level, which is why it floods all the time here.
Dang. Yeah, we are currently experiencing 115 degrees today.
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
so scared.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you mean, like that it's definitely like a coping mechanism. And I think it's interesting how like the people keep asking her if she like has grief yet, and she's almost like acting like because she has the jellyfish, like she doesn't have to experience grief because she is still holding on to that thing. But then like it's also very clear that she's experiencing grief the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I liked that a lot of her like unlikable characteristics just came from like the fact that she like wasn't aware of her own coping strategies. And like I don't know, I think it was kind of shitty. Like in the middle of it, she gets a divorce. Like that's, I don't know. She's unlikable, but also her circumstances are really unfortunate.
Yeah, the relationship between her and George was really interesting in that he didn't ask for the divorce, right? It's just she wanted kids. She did not want kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. And so she was like, you need to divorce me.
Yeah.
You'll never be happy with me. It's like a human version of that compartmentalization, I feel like, or like just extreme defensiveness that she feels, because it's like, oh, rather than you hurting me later or resenting me later, let's just get a divorce.
Yeah.
He said, like, to me, that seems like not logical, really. Like, it could be like a symptom of grief, but like she just thinks she's perfectly logical, not
totally
experiencing grief.
I kind of worry sometimes that because like we compartmentalize, like for example, climate grief, like I'll do that to other parts of my life and not be able to separate like the feelings from each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think too when you're someone who is like deeply I don't know, like zoned in on the scientific aspect of it too, like it's easy to just rely on the logic of everything and like experience everything in this like analytical way without taking into consideration the like deep trauma that comes with climate change. And yeah, so
and going back to how Dr. Cade is in science communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So her job, no pressure, I'm guessing, is like to take the science that climate scientists are doing and communicate it to the public and convince us all to act. And I'm sure she does that in a more academic capacity, like at her job. But through her fiction is also, right, like an extension of that science communication. But man, I just felt for like how like the despair of like all these papers, like when the sea witch was like shredding up the papers to make the jellyfish, because like all these years, all these scientists have been communicating and like, we didn't listen, we didn't address climate change. So it's just trash now. Like, oh, like I felt that so much. And Strawberry has a comment. You mentioned earlier that people don't take climate anxiety and grief seriously, and I've run into that problem with psychotherapy. I'm curious, like, is that like actually your therapist not taking it seriously? Or like, I don't know if you're a therapist and like getting other therapists to like take it seriously. But yeah, for sure. I've experienced the same thing in therapy. I've had some therapists who were like, "Oh, feeling grief or anxiety about like the world is like outside of your control. So why are you even like stressing so much about that? Like there's something wrong with you for stressing so much about that." But
Yeah.
I have had therapists who like get it and are like, well, especially my therapist I went and saw last year during COVID, and it was like it was like a Zoom therapist. And she was like, yeah, everyone's feeling it this year, you know? So maybe that's changing. I don't know. What are y'all's experience?
Yeah, I definitely I like my dream therapist is someone who will like go like indulge in existentialism with me, but I totally agree. Like every time I've tried to talk about something like very like meta or existential with a therapist, they're always like, oh, like this must be like a form of your depression or something. It's like, well, yeah, but it's also like I'm thinking about it constantly and I want to think about it. Like that's what helps me process a lot of my like the grief that I already have about climate change and my existentialism is to like know a lot about it and talk a lot about it. And I think, yeah, I haven't found a therapist who will go there with me yet. Uh, I work in peer support, and I have been trying really hard to look for resources um, to talk to. Like I work with LGBTQ youth, and to be able to talk to them about like all this shit that's happening. Like we've experienced like now this heat wave, like the fires, the ice storm, like COVID, all in the last year, and I've taken a few workshops, and every time it's like one person told me to just like find the joy in the change, and I was like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to like have very real, honest, vulnerable conversations with teenagers who are like growing up in a world that's like already experiencing a lot of destruction that they really have no control in. So yeah, I agree. That take.
And Strawberry clarified that they're a psychology major and also have experienced it from peers and from their own therapists. But yeah, they said, I don't know their pronouns, but Strawberry said therapists who don't take capitalism and the traumas it creates for everyone seriously, including climate change and the emotions that come with it, are not getting to the root of a lot of issues. Definitely big agree. For sure. And even if some therapists like are like, oh yeah, climate change, that's a bummer. It is like the capitalist analysis piece that's missing for me from a lot of just interacting with anybody, honestly. Like if you don't get it, like it's hard to talk to you.
But I feel like in this book, it's illustrated so well how like the grief is just like it's kind of like exhaustion, right? Like it's just like and then the eventual like progression of this like complete exhaustion with everything is just like suicide. Because also like the way they treat grief is just like non-existent.
Like support for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, you have the grief.
If you have the grief, you get locked up, right? You just get locked up and it's assumed that you will die. And it's assumed that you have nothing left to contribute to the world. And that assumption turns out to be incorrect in the case of like the artists or the grief. I guess artists, I don't know, grief artists is what word to call them that Ruby ends up visiting. Yeah. What did you think about like the themes of revenge in this book?
Wait, there were themes of revenge? Maybe I'm just an easy reader. Like in what?
Like, okay, like the old lady who's breeding the thylacines. Like Ruby at least assumed that she was breeding them to hunt humans, right? Like to get
yeah.
And then the birds that would, kill rats, but there was like an implication that the birds maybe we're gonna kill humans also, and not just rats.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. Like the old lady, Granny, is that what her name was? That was like such an interesting, weird little section that almost like felt a little disconnected from the rest of the story. I don't know. But I was like, okay, like I literally like the climax of that section happened in like one paragraph and I almost missed it. And but yeah, when she said, "Can you watch something die and let it die?" Was that, would you say that that was like the take on like humans being like parasitic to the world and like watching, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. And that's why it was interesting reading this right after Braiding Sweetgrass, because Braiding Sweetgrass was like such a revelation for me and so wonderful. And I've been thinking so much about Robin Kimmerer's question about like how humans can give back to the earth, and like trying to learn and look at like positive human earth interactions, and like breaking this myth that we are parasitic inherently. Like we are, this culture certainly behaves parasitically, but like humans weren't always like that and don't always have to be like that. But this book was definitely like, I felt like coming from a place of like team humans are parasites, and I thought the revenge theme was like huge. Like, aren't the grief-stricken artists like, I kind of thought they're all like creating these dangerous de-extinction projects that have the potential to kill people, and they're like recruiting Ruby. I thought at the end the Sea Witch is like recruiting Ruby to join them.
Interesting.
I'm like a very
okay, look at the last paragraph. We're jumping to the end for spoilers, but don't you want to pay them back, said the Sea Witch.
Oh yeah.
That's how I read it. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. Listen, I finished this at like 11:30 last night. But
yeah.
Yeah, I could see that it's like such a deep like undertone of the book that I don't know. I think Octavia Cade's really intelligent.
She is. There's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah.
I haven't read her other book, but I've read a bunch of short stories by her, and they're always so weird and kind of funny and dark. She has this really great one about how there was some big court case where a river got made a person, and a river was given like human rights. So then she wrote a book about, or a short story about like rivers becoming people. I don't know. It was very cool. I think it was also kind of murderous.
She really likes to personify like different things about climate change. Like the Scanwida is like literally giving like human characteristics to extinct animals and creatures. But I think I agree that this like is definitely coming from a place of humans are parasitic. I am seeing the themes of revenge as you talk us through it. And I think it is interesting, like thinking about Braiding Sweetgrass in contrast with this. And sorry. And yeah, like the idea, because I originally thought that they were creating, like bringing back these like animatronic, like animal things to almost like bring in, reintroduce biodiversity to like try to bring back species, or like is that like continue to maintain what they have. But then obviously like the wrens were like stabbing the rats with poison. And where's it going with that? Oh yeah, just like I've been thinking a lot too since our last live show about the idea of just like nurturing a world that has been so destructive or experienced so much destruction. And I don't know. I think that the like them bringing back these, what did they call? There was like a word that they used.
The thylacines or the birds?
Just for like anything that they were trying to like mimic an animal. Like she talked about the sea witch doing that with yeah, like the plastic.
De-extinction? Or no?
Hold on, Cody has to sneeze.
I read it last week, so I'm not sure.
The sneeze went away. Yeah, I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but I wonder like how Octavia Cade thinks about like reestablishing a planet, because it kind of seemed like she was going there and then was like, oh no, like humans can't even be responsible for that. They'll just fuck it up and like make them evil robots.
But I think it's more like, for me, I interpret it as like the grief just like corrupts people so much that like even if the intention is there, it's so much emotion that it can't be organized. Like I think there's one part where she says that like people with grief, even if it's a community that's stricken with grief, can never work together with each other. Mm-hmm. And I think like, it might be a reflection of like the selfish part, but also like the fact that like when there's so much sorrow, like I don't know, that they just want to do something, you can't like take any feedback or create something like together, and how that ultimately becomes like more parasitic than like actually trying to bring back these species.
Maybe it's a criticism of climate despair, like climate nihilism, something that I think we've talked about before that I get really frustrated with is people who are just like brand new to climate grief are just there's nothing we can do. It's all over. You're screwed. Don't have kids. Like burn it all down. Like there's no hope. And people who've been in the fight a lot longer, you have to fight to have reasons to have hope, and you get involved and you're in communities and you are working on stuff and doing stuff. And there's so many people who like just start learning about climate change and like already give up on the whole entire planet and the whole entire like project of saving Earth. It's just really frustrating to me. I don't know, maybe the grief is like almost like a criticism of that, because it does make them sort of unable to function. Although she did say like people in grief can't be in community with each other, but then it turns out they are, right? Because the 3 or 4 different grief artists that we meet are like leading Ruby on this path. I was surprised by like how suspenseful it was and like what kind of a mystery it was.
Yeah, I really liked how each different like path or part on her path, I don't know how to say that, was really surprising. Like she just like really went there, like with the sea witch cutting out her tongue, and the like holographic pond was really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think like there's probably a metaphor in there too about just everything being so surprising.
Yeah, also the book she finds in the pond is the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, right? Which the sea witch had at the beginning. Is that what y'all got? But I don't know those fairy tales that well, so I don't know. I guess The Little Mermaid is the one they're referencing, right? Because sea witch.
Yeah.
But I don't know the original fairy tale very well, so I don't know like what the significance of that was really.
I think
the voicelessness.
I think she, in the original one, she cuts out her tongue.
Oh, okay. Sea witch does.
I think either or she cuts out the mermaid's tongue. So there's something about that like that is the voice.
Okay. And then I guess the thing of like feeling voiceless is like because they were scientists and they were trying to communicate, they were trying to use their voice, and it was all for naught. So might as well not have a tongue. I guess that's what she says right before she cuts out her tongue.
Mm-hmm.
But then that was just a trap for the main character, right? Because like a test, like was it a test, do you think, when the sea witch let the water into the pool full of jellyfish? Like, was she trying to kill herself and then she accidentally survived? Or was that all like a test that was part of this like elaborate scheme to get Ruby to join the grief people?
I interpret it as like she was like not actually there at the end, like she did die, but then like our main character saw her as like a ghost, which means that she like entered the grief stage, like she was starting to see things, or like that was like the first step for her to like, or for the reader to interpret her as like entering the grief. Actually, that's how I did it.
Yeah, I got it as she wasn't, or she was dead, even though at the end she said she wasn't dead. But then she was like, hey, to that like random person. And it was like very unclear whether they actually saw her or not. I don't know.
Hey, well, he does speak back. He says, hey, great to see you. Sorry, I can't stop to chat. I gotta run. And then she says, told you, people here you've got grief, and they stop looking, afraid to see their own futures, I expect. I think she's saying she's dead, like metaphorically. Like as soon as you succumb to the grief, people, I think she's alive at the end. But maybe that's what's cool about this book is it is kind of poetic, I guess, and like just open to a lot of different interpretations. Because we all got different stuff from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there is like an artistic like surrealism to it, which is interesting how there was so much conversation of like being an artist versus being a scientist. And it's almost like she's looking at, I mean, obviously she's an author, but she's like looking at climate change and climate grief through an artistic perspective.
Evan has a question. If they say they're afraid to see their own future, does that mean everyone eventually gets the grief and not just a conscious few? What did y'all think?
I feel like everyone in the book has grief, but it's just like whether or not your grief is like noticeable or like visible. I don't know.
Do you think that's true in the real world? Like, do you think, because I kind of think it is. I think everyone is experiencing climate grief. I don't think anyone's immune to it, but some people are just really not in touch with the fact.
Yeah.
Like, I've been teaching camp this week. And I've been teaching, it's like a creative writing camp at Rice University. And I had like 11 and 12-year-olds. And because I had just read Braiding Sweetgrass, I was like, I got to do something with these like feelings from reading that book. So I did like a nature scavenger hunt because we were walking around the Rice campus a lot. And there's like a lot of beautiful live oak trees and birds and stuff. And I noticed the kids just like walk right by them and like they don't pay any attention to nature whatsoever. And it's creative writing. So I was like, we did this whole day on nature writing. And I asked them if they knew what Houston's ecology had been like before white settlement. And none of them knew even what this land had been. They thought it was like a jungle or a swamp, like the Everglades sort of, were the guesses. Someone thought it was like a forest, but this was like coastal prairie. There were like buffalo and red wolves, and like it would have just been like tall grasses and wildflowers from here to the sea. And none of them knew that. So I kind of painted that picture for them. And then, I don't know, I feel like as the day went on, it was kind of a lot for them. And we also talked about the Karankawa people who were like completely exterminated that used to live here. Like that culture was like entirely genocided. And yeah, I just felt like the kids. So then they went on this scavenger hunt. And we were writing about nature, and they were just looking at it. And like this kid who had been like all week complaining about like every time we went outside, like, I'm allergic to grass, I'm allergic to tree pollen. Oh, you know, he was like staring at this butterfly and writing a poem about a butterfly. It was so beautiful. And the kids were, and I was like, what would you make this campus like if you were in charge of the grounds at Rice? And they were all like, why don't they have tall grasses? Why don't they make it prairie again? Like, why don't they make it how it was? Like, you know, why are there all these like short lawns? Why not have, so like, I just feel like, I don't know, just like I was the first adult to ever talk to them about like the wounds on the land that we all live on. And it was like this really kind of big thing for them. And they were like, there was like a lot of emotions coming up. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people have this climate grief right under the surface that they don't even know why, or they, you know, like the world is brutal and awful and they just are angry and sad and don't know why.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think I've noticed in myself like my own stages of grief with climate grief. Like I can remember from a very young age like experiencing this sense of like hopelessness. I also I was kind of like radicalized by one of my dad's girlfriends post my mom, because she was very like opposite of my mom, who's like loves Trump and God, and that's another story. But this lady was like the first person to talk to me about climate change, but was very in like climate nihilism, like was very like, shit's fucked, you can't do anything about it, the planet's probably gonna explode. Like, so I was in like 4th grade writing essays about how the planet was gonna explode. So I can like see my own, I don't know, like different cycle. Like I think I've gone through a lot of cycles too. Yeah.
I went to college to be an environmental scientist because I was like, for sure, that's what I want to do. And it's the first class I took Climate Science 101 my freshman year. And the professor was this like big shot professor who had been part of the team that had figured out what that the CFCs were putting the hole in the ozone layer. So he was like this big deal. And he was such a climate nihilist. And he was like, and this was, you know, in like the early 2000s. And he was just like so depressed. And every day he was just like spewing that all onto us. And like, it's all over. No one's listening. Nothing's going to change. All this is going to happen. All this is going to die. And I like learned all the climate science, like, you know, in this in-depth class, and like understood how everything was going to unravel on this deep level. And I got suicidally depressed, and I had to transfer colleges, and I changed majors to writing because I was like, if there's no hope and there's nothing that can be done, then I might as well just like read books and write books until it all ends. And that one guy, like his nihilism made that big of an impact. So I don't want to have that impact on kids. That's not what I was going for, and I hope that I didn't.
I don't think so. I think that the approach you had was very beautiful, and I'm glad you did it to the youngsters. Sounds nice.
Yeah. I
sometimes
hope they remember
it. I sometimes feel like betrayed by the people who raised me, that they didn't teach me these things. Like sometimes, like I think I had this moment when I was growing up, and I'm like, why has no one told me about these horrible things that are happening in the world? Like, why did no one teach me about climate change earlier? You know, and almost felt like this betrayal from like my elders that I wasn't educated in it.
I really struggle, and Sage, I wonder if you've thought about this with like when to start this with my 4-year-old, because she loves the natural world so much. Like I've raised her to be such a naturalist, and like she's learned all these species of wildflowers along the bayou. She loves nature because we go out and as much as we can. And we've started talking about like not wasting resources, not wasting water, like don't, paper comes from trees. We don't want to waste it, but I don't want to like traumatize her too early, but I don't I don't know when's the right time to start talking about it.
Yeah, that's hard. I think too, it's like, I mean, I think there's a way to talk about climate change in like Octavia Cade's like analytical but also artistic way, you know, where there is, I don't know, I think it just, for me anyway, like what I've had to teach myself is just like to be aware of what's happening and to like be objective about my own emotional state within it, which is really hard to be objective about your own emotions. But I don't know, I know that there are like a lot of like picture books and chapter books like that talk about climate change that maybe will like, I don't know, be like
There's
age
some
appropriate,
optimism.
but I don't know.
One about Greta Thunberg that's like very optimistic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I felt
an idea. I think warnings are enough for young children. Take care of what we have so it doesn't go away. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. And like gradually as she grows up, you know, man, what I wouldn't have given when I was in junior high or high school to just have any adult, I don't think I had a single adult in my life acknowledge that climate change was happening. Strawberry did have a good teacher, junior year of high school. You learned about climate change, but your teacher was an optimist and she taught us we could improve things. I think that is the way to go with kids.
And I think also like in the context of this book, like if we were also taught like a way to handle that grief, like with mental health, and also like putting mental health first in the context of climate change, and that could be like revolutionary for like how kids are like taught to be dealt with this topic, and then go on to like make change from a place of like a more stable, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think too, it's hard not to act out of fear too about climate change. Like I absolutely act out of fear pretty frequently, just like with, you know, there's like so much, like it's never, the last time it was 107 degrees in Oregon was in 1981 and it's 115 today. So it's like, I definitely have this fear of like everything is changing so fast and like I feel like it's so out of my control and that's so scary, but it's also like part of my, I don't know, like ideal mental practice of like knowing when to like let go of control. And in a lot of ways, like I just had to be prepared. Like we have like next to me, I have like tubs of our wildfire go boxes, and I just like had to channel that into like being prepared and like knowing, just like staying informed. So I feel like when Otto's like old enough to know what's going on, like I'll absolutely have them be like aware of like why we're packing our wildfire bag or like why we have to I don't know, go to a different state for a week or whatever. Like I want them to be aware of what's going on, and I think that that can be scary, but I also don't want to like sugarcoat reality, but I also don't want to be a nihilist. It's like a very, you know,
I want kids to have some time to not, some years of their life to not worry about all this shit quite so much.
Yeah. I want myself to have some years to not worry about it. I'm exhausted.
During the freeze this year, you know, we did just approach it as like, this is a fun adventure. I mean, she knew it was a problem that the power was out and that the power was not supposed to be out. But we tried to make it as magical as possible. Like we pitched a tent in the house and she thought that was really fun. It's like for survival, so we don't freeze to death, but like we're not going to say that part to her, you know?
Yeah.
I want to go back to what Will said about like prioritizing mental health and also just like everything about therapy. And I was just kind of thinking like, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel like this book club is actually like my climate grief therapy club.
Absolutely.
And like, that's, maybe we should rename it the Climate Grief Therapy Club because That's what it is. And like no therapist has ever understood that, but just being the only thing that helps with it for me is talking to other people who get it. And I don't have many people, like I'm really grateful for you too, because I don't have many people in my life. I have like one friend, my friend Maria, who stares into the void with me. Like she gets it, and my husband, he's concerned and everything, but he's a very like, I feel like he's actually here, like George reminded me of him in the book. I don't know. He's like very practical. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's not that he doesn't feel things, but he doesn't get so hung up on things he can't change.
Mm-hmm.
But I really appreciate this community for that.
Yeah, it's like what was said in the book about how people with the grief what was the line? Can't be in community or something?
Yeah, and like work together, work with other people.
Yeah, but I feel like that's like the only thing we can do.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, right? That's so much more important than individual action. That's the other thing about teaching climate change that to kids that gets me is because so many of these books, because I've started to look at them, but so many of these books teach the way we were taught about the environment in the 90s, which is yes, the environment is threatened, but as long as you recycle, is up to you, and they just give some like little platitude, some like bullshit thing, which one that's putting it on a little kid, like their individual actions, which we know is not true. We know this is systemic. We know this is about evil rich people and capitalism. And like, where's the picture book teaching kids that? I think that would be much more helpful. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an impulse to give kids like easy answers because we think it makes them feel empowered, but really it makes them feel really guilty, and then guilt leads to climate nihilism.
True. Yeah.
It's a hard thing. Evan had a question. Climate people should also teach coaching workshops on top of conservation education. I say yes, we should.
I think so too.
Be more normalized, and especially in like movements, I think, or like any type of like organization that tries to, conquer climate change.
Yeah, I think it also should also be like in any field of work, honestly, because it is so real to everyone. Like, I think about like the workshop that I've taken on talking about climate change and peer support. Like, I kind of want to do a workshop like that, but obviously do it better and talk about the systemic issues. And I think also as more of these like diversity trainings are like popping up around different workplaces, it's also like if we're not talking about how climate change is affecting like indigenous communities like way more than us, like that's not really, I don't know, like that is still going to impact how someone's going to show up to their job at the grocery store, like it's all very intersectional. And
that's the same kind of like putting a Band-Aid on systemic problems. Like if your job is just doing a diversity training, but your job is part of a capitalist machine that is based in systemic racism and white supremacy, then yeah. Oh, Strawberry confirmed their pronouns are they, and they also shared this thing, which hopefully everybody knows by now. John Oliver did a good segment on it recently.
And they can
it's not recyclable.
Yeah, and when they can be recycled, they can only be recycled to lower forms of plastic. So at some point, they can't be recycled again, even if they are recyclable like once or twice.
Yep.
So there's that.
Yeah. There's I don't know if anyone has read what's it called? That nonfiction book about mushrooms.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it. I had it on hold in the library for like so long, and then it never came.
It's damn it, what's it called? I don't remember, but there is a lot of like climate hope in that, of how we Entangled Life. Thank you.
Entangled Life. Okay, cool. Okay, it is.
Yeah.
I want to read that.
Yeah. There's a lot of like hope in how we can use mushrooms to like help us overcome a lot of and like restore. Oh my god. Yes, absolutely. Compost the ridge and then we can grow some mushrooms on top of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like mushrooms that can eat a lot of plastics and actually decompose them. And there's just like, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of like hope and possibility. It's just like getting these major corporations to stop fucking drilling into the earth and exploiting everybody underneath them.
That's actually something I've been thinking about lately in terms of like how we think about science fiction as a genre. Because I'm really frustrated. I've been starting to write solar punk and hope punk stories, and you can't sell them to a lot of sci-fi markets because they define science fiction as like stories where the plot is driven by a new technology. And they're like, if there's not a new technology that's critical to your plot, like don't bother submitting it. And to me, that's such a limited way. Like science fiction is about, for me, how technology shapes society. And we have all the technology that we need to address climate change. We don't need to wait on more technology. So I want to see a lot more stories showing how we could use technology in different ways to create a sustainable world or to create better worlds. And like, that's what solar punk is doing. Solar punk doesn't, invent the like magic energy source that fixes everything. So it's frustrating to me that definition of science is so limited, and like something has to be like, there's so many ways we could be using technology to solve problems, and fiction is a great way to explore that. And there's not really a home for those stories. There's not many, at least. And that's frustrating to me. That, Evan, I think I'm gonna like throw shade, but I think Asimov's has that in their submission guidelines, and there's a couple other like big influential top name pro-rate science fiction magazines that put that in their submission guidelines, where like it has to be somewhere.
I remember in creative writing classes when they would like define what each genre was. It was like sci-fi has to be like either you're in space or like there's a new technology, which is definitely limiting.
No, that's weird. Wait, I thought sci-fi was just like the future. Like
it should be, right? It should just be like futures, speculative futures.
I mean, dystopians are science fiction. That's like a subgenre under science fiction, no?
It depends on how it's being classified. More so in novels, it's more the short story sci-fi world is still very controlled by a few pro-rate publications, which have been around for a long time and are mostly all edited by white baby boomer men. And because they are the pro-rate market, they have the money to pay authors a pro-rate, and only pro-rate stories get considered for awards, and only pro-rate authors can be in the Sci-Fi Writers Union. So there's actually still like quite a bottleneck of fitting through what appeals to old white men to becoming an established science fiction author. And this is my frustration.
That's really frustrating.
Yeah.
I agree with Evan. Adventure Time is just the ultimate everything. I love Adventure Time so much.
Don't even get me started.
Is Adventure Time climate fiction, do you think?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like post-nuclear war.
Yeah. About how like this nuclear bomb like destroyed half the planet, and now like all these cool like creatures live there, and also like space and like talking candy. It's very fun.
There's like some really deep themes too. I don't know. I feel like Princess Bubblegum's like character arcs are very interesting from an anarchist perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, the Great Mushroom War. Yeah, there's a lot. I watch a lot of like fan theories and things about Adventure Time, but like it's interesting because they have the 4 elements, which are fire, ice, slime, and bubblegum, and it's like interesting to see how those things like still have to find a balance in that show. And I think like that in itself is such a commentary on how like in so many ways we are out of balance with our own elements, and like so everything's just like going absolutely wild with like so much like water and hurricanes, or like so much drought and fire.
Man,
Yeah.
Then what
Do
is
you want to just like vent about what you're going through up there? Like, do you want to just like, tell us about it?
Sure.
You don't have to, but you're welcome to, because I mean,
I
this
do
is
like
place
this
for it.
idea of like a video essay about Adventure Time from a climate grief perspective. I think a part of me feels like I want to start doing video essays. I don't know. I've been really into them lately. But yeah, so we're experiencing a heat wave on the West Coast. But they're also calling it a heat dome. And so we're like pretty much at the center of heat dome, and but the whole West Coast is fucking hot right now. So yeah, it's 115 today is the high. Today is supposed to be the hottest day in Portland. It's 115. I live like in a little bit higher elevation, so it's only gonna get to like 111, which is like still so ridiculous. Yeah, it hasn't. Oregon's never been hotter than 107, like that on record. And that last time that happened was in 1981, and then it happened twice in 81, and then before that, it was like the 1800s that it happened. And so it's just like very real, and we don't have air conditioning.
Oh my God, really? Wait, you're talking to us right now, and
yeah,
we're not in
so since we have like cement floors in the barn and we have trees that block the sun, it's like not too bad, and I have a fan and stuff. But and I set up like a little pool yesterday. So it's probably like 80 degrees inside right now. I don't know. I think that's like 115 is like 40 something Celsius. It's really hot. I'm sorry, Wilma. And because it's so hot and everyone's running their AC and fans and everything, the power grid like cannot handle it, and so people keep losing power, which is also terrifying to lose power when it's this hot. But yeah, I've never experienced this kind of heat before, and I don't know. I'm just kind of like living it. I'm kind of scared of the wildfire potential because it is so hot, and it's going to continue to be really hot, like in the upper 90s for the foreseeable future. And 4th of July scares me so much. And like a lot of our fires in the past have started from fireworks, and yeah, we're in like very dangerous fire potential.
And you're living out there with all those Trump people.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Yeah, who just like shoot explosives for fun.
I'm so sorry, Sage. It sounds awful.
And it's frustrating because it could, like, it's very much. Evan, thank you for the reminder to wear sunscreen. It's true. It's very much like I would love it if there was, like an announcement to like limit your firework usage or something, but because everyone like loves conflict and their like fucked up vision of America, that would literally just rile everyone up, and yeah, then they'd be like, oh, you're trying to take my rights away to fucking patriotism. And it's just like there's really
country, man. This fucking country.
So
it would unless, oh God, it would.
Yeah.
Every time there's a school shooting, the handgun sales skyrocket.
Dang.
AR-15s. Every time there's a mass shooting, gun sales go up.
That's America, baby.
That's America. I hate it here.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. We have everything ready to go if we need to go. And my new, like, online refreshing compulsion is the fire maps, but so far there's only 3 fires in Oregon.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. It's also, oh, hi, Iris. They have banned, there are illegal fireworks in Oregon, so you can only technically, and those have been banned for a long time, like Roman candles and like the ones that shoot out and explode, but nobody regulates that, so people just drive across the border to Washington and get those fireworks anyway and bring them back. And it's so like it's not like Portland is like 10 minutes away from Vancouver, Washington, so it's not hard to get those fireworks, and people definitely do that as like a fun thing to do.
Yeah, they're banned in the city, but you can just drive outside our city and get them. God, it's gonna be the 4th of July. I fucking hate it. We have someone in our neighborhood who every night, like right when my daughter's going to bed, just shoots off a gun. They're just out there shooting off a gun, shooting at something every night, and I hate them so much.
It's so stressful and it's so loud too. It's like I film I post like meditation videos for my library and I usually film them outside, and like half the time I'll be filming it and then there's just like bam bam, like god damn it. It's not the meditation vibes we're looking for.
I didn't know you did meditation videos.
Yeah,
me neither.
Yeah.
Is it a different channel or?
Yeah, it's on the library, so it's the Oregon City Public Library if you're interested.
Oh, for your job, your library job. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're winding down in terms of time. I don't have my next book picked just yet, but I want to do an anthology. So lots of different short stories and.
I got this one that you recommended.
Oh yeah, I just read it already.
Did you like it?
I did. I liked some stories more than others. But it was good. I feel like it was still kind of too many of the stories disappointed me, and I felt like they were still too capitalistic in their solutions to climate change. So I kind of want to keep looking for other anthology. And maybe it's because it was like cities, multi-species cities. Maybe it's harder to imagine a city that's not capitalist. I don't know.
I was like meditations.
Yes. You have a fan.
Iris is my biggest fan. Thank you, Iris.
Whose pick is next month?
It's mine. It's this one.
Oh, cool. I gotta get that still. Tell us about it again.
Yeah, it's Downdrift by Johanna Drucker. Oh my, next month.
Why'd you pick it?
Because I think it's gonna be a bit silly, and it's like about this like species that I think evolves through like many centuries and lives for a long time and kind of like observes the world. And then I also think it's about like how animals kind of get more like human characteristics, which is something I just love in books. I don't know why, but I think that's like a fun thing to read about. And it says on the cover it's an eco-fiction, so I'm guessing it has some like climate change themes, because I've seen it on like lists for climate change books.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see everybody back. Thank you so much, Evan and Strawberry and Iris and Penguin Stories, for participating and joining us in the chat. And thank you again for being my climate therapy group. And I think I'm going to start promoting our book club as that.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially since we'll have a nonfiction book coming up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Time
that's
for
another
therapy.
announcement is we've decided to sometimes do nonfiction as well.
Yes.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Oh God, my voice.